Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of HeartCore, the Human Design Podcast, with Celestina once again a little bit, well, how shall we say this? Sleep deprived? This is going to be a fun episode, I think. So I am Miko, and Celestina is on the other side of the world.
Hey guys, coming at you from down under. They don't call it that here though, it's just Aussie.
Today we're going to be talking about part 2 of Marilyn Monroe, and we're going to be focusing on some of her lovers, or at least some of the lovers that she was said to have had. So there's no real proof for the lovers in her life. There is some, of course, proof for the marriage certificates, for example. So the ones that we're going to be covering today are James Daugherty, Joe DiMaggio, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Bobby or Robert Kennedy, and Natasha Lytess. We're going to tell you about the birth times and dates we found for these individuals, but for now, these are the ones that we looked into as far as we could. And there are a few interesting connections that we found, of course, when we combined their human design charts. If you're watching, you can now see the chart of Marilyn Monroe, and James Daugherty is the next one that you're going to see. So Marilyn Monroe, we already covered it. If you haven't taken a look at that one or listened to that one yet, then do so. It's the episode 40, which is part 1, Marilyn Monroe as an individual chart. You can see that she's an emotional projector. She has 4 centers defined: her emotional solar plexus, her root, her ajna, and her head. And the rest is undefined, her ego being open. She is a 6-2 projector. And what we didn't mention, which I thought was also interesting to look at when you're considering a projector. So yes, she has the gate 22, which gives her this grace in her Mars energy. So it's something that develops over time. We kind of looked at that one, but she is also a projector. So a lot of times projectors, they have the sexual energy being projected onto them. So projectors take in the sacral energy, which is connected to the life force energy, but also sexual energy. And what happens to projectors is that they don't have their own sexual energy or life force energy within them, but they take it from the generators. They don't steal it, they kind of borrow it, and they amplify that energy. So when you have a projector and a generator, the projector may actually seem much more sexual and sensual than the generator, because they take in that energy and they amplify it. That's the same that can happen with manifestors or reflectors. So anyone that has an undefined sacral center. And I think this is what happened a lot to her as well, because she does have the reflection aspect of the second line as well, where people project onto her what they want to see in themselves. It's not the same kind of energy as the 5th line, but it does have a tendency where people see something in a second line and they see all this natural talent, and then they can call out that second line to show their skills to the world. And I think a lot had around her charm and her sex appeal was also related to her amplifying these energies from within her. I also watched an interview from Natasha Lytess about Marilyn Monroe, and she said that she was actually a very, very shy individual. I also watched the documentary of the movie that was never completed. Not entirely sure the name of it. She had a few scenes, and it was very difficult for her to show up on set, and she was going through a lot. She was very depressed. She also apparently tried to take her own life during the filming of the movie, and that is also what is claimed for her death, that she overdosed on painkillers, I believe, or she had an overdose. She was going through a lot, and you can also see that in her chart with the gate 63.4 or the channel 63.4 being defined. there was a lot of doubt that was happening in her mind, a lot of pondering, a lot of trying to find answers to certain questions in a logical way. So this is a very logical circuitry. And this will kind of come into play as well with her partners. She has this logical definition in an unconsciously defined head center. So all of her head center gates are defined. The 64, 61, and 63 are all defined, providing her with a lot of questions that she's wondering about. There probably was, according to her design and also according to some tales of others, a lot of doubt about herself. She had a completely open ego, which also, again, kind of fueled this self-consciousness of, am I really good enough? And she kept asking that, as far as I heard in the documentaries. She kept asking, was this good enough? Was that scene okay? Was I acting right? There was a lot of self-doubt in her. And when you're looking at James Doughty, you can see that he is an emotionally defined generator. And he's a triple split definition. So his design and also the way he feels about himself was very split apart. There is a longer process for him to digest things. So he's an emotional being and he already takes a lot of time to make decisions if he follows his strategy correctly. And if he follows his inner authority correctly, then he needs a lot of time to make up his mind or make the right decisions for him. And additionally, because he's a triple split, it takes even longer for him to make decisions because it needs to go from his head through his body and then to his clarity so that he finally knows and understands, okay, this is the right decision for me and this is not the right decision for me. So a very long process. And he is very defined in his chart. The only two centers that are left undefined and even completely open, the G center is completely open, the throat center is undefined. But when you're looking at them together, everything becomes defined except for the G center. That remains undefined. So a lot of conditioning that is happening from him towards her. And one thing that I did notice in all of her partners is that they all have the ego defined, providing her, Celestina is nodding her head wildly, providing her with the willpower to pull through, to do things, but also probably providing her with the sense of, maybe I am good enough. James Doughty, for me, I also watched an interview of him when he was talking about Marilyn Monroe. He was actually talking about Norma Jean, and he also made sure to make this differentiation. So for him, Norma Jean was the person that he fell in love with, and then Marilyn Monroe was another individual that she became, but it's not the same person for him. And Natasha Lytess also seems to have the same input regarding that Marilyn Monroe was pretending to be someone or acting as a certain Marilyn Monroe instead of being her real and true Norma Jean. So he seemed to have been a very supportive husband, and he also let her do her thing. He seems to have supported her in whatever decision she wanted to make. However, if you're looking at them in a relationship, you can see that there are a few compromises happening. One is in 5027, in the channel 5027, which is called Channel of Preservation. We have the 6447, the Channel of Abstraction. There's a compromise there. And there is another one in channel 4253, the channel of maturation. So there are a few compromises that they had to handle, but there were also a lot of electromagnetic channels. And electromagnetic channels, you may think, oh my God, this is what you want in a relationship. I want to have electromagnetic channels everywhere. It can make and or break a relationship. So electromagnetic channels are the initial spark. It may feel very exciting at the beginning, but those are often the places where in the end you're going to be like, yeah, that was something that kind of annoyed me at the beginning already. I loved it, but I hate it at the same time. So it's really this love and hate with electromagnetics. You need to be aware of it. You need to understand them in your relationships. But the compromising channels are often the ones that we pay most attention to from the get-go. The electromagnetic at the beginning feel like this wild, fiery passion. So for them, there could have been some compromise related to abstract thoughts and abstract thinking, whereas the logical thoughts were dominated by Marilyn Monroe. The abstract ones was dominated by James Dougherty, because he has the full channel and she only has one gate, which could have also additionally created some doubt in her of her ideas and her thoughts really being accurate, and he kind of having this pressure or this need to have a clear answer to certain things. So this is his gate 47, for example, is in his Saturn, which again provides some sense of restriction, some sense of I have to be very strict with myself when it comes to this topic, otherwise Jupiter is going to punish me. If you know what your Saturn gates are, this is kind of the rule. You really need to oblige to your Saturn gates unless you want to have the Jupiter gates really run havoc on you or something like that. So they can really punish you if you don't listen to your Saturn. Did you look into James Dougherty and Marilyn Monroe's connection together? Because this was actually mine, but maybe Celestina had something else to add to this relationship.
I didn't, but I thought it was very interesting that she sought out someone. I mean, if you guys recall from the first Marilyn Monroe episode, this was a neighbor that she married with her last, within her last foster home, right? So it wasn't necessarily that she sought out this relationship, but she married so that she wouldn't have to go back into the foster system for a year, because she was 16, 17 and got married at 17 to James. And it just happens to be that he has a defined spleen and a defined ego. And I think it's very interesting. We're going to see this throughout as well. Save one, perhaps. I don't know what Natasha's chart looks like, so we'll save that. But JFK does not have a defined spleen. However, the more significant relationships in her life, the people that she truly, truly loved, said she truly, truly loved, I find it very interesting that they had defined spleens. And if I recall, hers is not completely open, but it is undefined. So it's just very interesting that the splenic energy is it can pull you in, right? So I wonder if she felt pulled in by these people. So it's just very interesting to note that even though her first husband was kind of not like a setup, but low-key kind of like a setup, they knew each other, but it was interesting that she was brought into his energy in this way. And I find it so interesting. The 4037 channel kind of stays a constant throughout those same relationships, and we're going to see that as well. Again, just so interesting.
Absolutely. She had a type, as it seems. And this is really if all the birth times and dates are accurate. So always bear that in mind. We did the best that we could to find the accurate birth times. However, it is not 100% clear if James Dougherty's birth time or John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy have accurate birth times. Natasha Lytess definitely does not. We're still going to look at one of the potential charts, but that is all over the place. There is no accurate birth day. There is no accurate birth year. So it's really all over the place. But for now, this is what we went with. And another thing that I found interesting with James Dougherty was also that he said that he wanted to have children. And you can see that. I mean, family to him is very important. The 4037, as you have mentioned. He also had the 6th gate defined twice, once in his conscious moon and once in his unconscious earth. So it's a very important thing for him. And he also had the channel 2750, which is all about giving his values to the next generation. So for him, the reason for divorce, as far as I've understood, was that Marilyn Monroe was supposed to sign with Fox. I think it was already Fox at that point after her modeling career. So she was supposed to sign with Fox, and they didn't want their actresses to get pregnant. So they wanted single ladies. They didn't want to be hiring a married woman, because back in the day when you were married, it also meant that you were going to have children, at least if everything works well in your reproductive system. But that was the plan. When you're married, you try to have children, and he really, really wanted that. Whereas she then decided to leave him because she wanted to pursue her career. But you can see that there's a lot of energy and a lot of potential for him to really want this to happen for him, have a family, especially with his unconscious earth placement in the 6.2. That's a very prominent placement.
Can we just, though? He has my birthday.
What? Yay. Yep. Just a few years earlier.
Just a few. Beginning of the century, closer to the end of the century. Same.
Cool.
I love how you said we were going to breeze over him, and you went full on.
Well,
All right. Let's roll on to Homeboy Joe. Amazing. So, Joe DiMaggio, Yankee center fielder, had to look that up because I was a disgrace last week and didn't know what position he played. Anyway, a 3/5 emotional manifesting generator with a connection from his emotional solar plexus to his ego. And this stays constant throughout the loves of her life, which I think is really interesting. We have a very intense connection from his sacral to his throat, and then that also connection to the splenic area as well. Their relationship, my understanding is they met through like a mutual friend, and it blossomed pretty quick. However, this is the relationship that I noted. She got married before her Saturn return, and then they divorced about 9 months later when she was like full on in her Saturn return. So I think that that's really important to note as well. Joe DiMaggio's energy, other than the 4 centers that are defined, he is split, so it may feel a bit disconnected for him, but his energy is pretty open, and together they have everything defined except for their G center. And this was the same, if I recall, with Dougherty as well, right? So not having a defined self together. Joe and Marilyn's charts, when put together, they have an undefined G center, similarly to James and Marilyn's chart. However, in this instance with Joe, they are a triple split, which probably felt extremely disconnected and also didn't give Marilyn the sense of self that she was probably looking for, right? Like probably looking for that wholeness. So in comparison to James, feeling that one sense of self-identity when together, with Joe, the marriage, again, did not last very long, 9 months. There was probably a lack of feeling sense of self, a bit more disjointed because they didn't connect in as many ways. And if we're looking at the amount of electromagnetics, compromise, and dominance channels, if you recall, James Daughtry and Marilyn Monroe had about 5 electromagnetic channels, whereas Joe and Marilyn only have 1 electromagnetic channel together. And seemingly, that 1 electromagnetic channel was not enough to keep them going for the long term. They also have 2 compromise channels and 4 dominance channels. And of those 4 dominance channels, Joe DiMaggio had 4 of the dominance channels over Marilyn Monroe. So it must have been a lot of different / potentially heavier energy with him than her previous husband, or perhaps previous lovers in general. So it's interesting though, because Joe had such an affinity and such a deep, deep love for her. You mentioned last time, Miko, that he left her flowers on her grave for like 20 years or something like that, every day or every week. So
every week.
Yeah, I would love to know from you, is there anything that speaks or harks on that in particular, looking at their charts? Because I feel like this can be a very challenging connection chart to experience, and it could make sense as to why the marriage itself didn't last as long.
I think for me, one of the biggest ones that stands out is actually his unconscious sun. So he has the 59th gate coming up over, he's got it 3 times in his chart, once in his unconscious Mercury in 59.3, One's in his South Node 59.2 and one's in his unconscious Sun 59.5. The one that I'm honing in on is the 59.5 because that is the female femme fatale or Casanova. The Casanova is an extremely strong line where people look at that person, they feel attracted to them, and they really feel this desire. However, it's looking towards her emotional solar plexus or his emotional solar plexus. And there's no connection that is bridging those two connections. So as Celestina has mentioned, it's a triple split, which is very, very heavy. It's very challenging in a relationship. There needs to, if you're not aware of it, so there needs to be a lot of movement. They need to do a lot of activities with other people. Their auras need to mingle. Basically, it doesn't mean that they need to have extramarital affairs with anyone else, but it could be something how it plays out when you're not aware of these energies. But doing a lot of things with other people is going to help bridge these individuals. So it's not a couple that is going to thrive by just sitting together at home on top of one another and do their thing by themselves all the time.
They would not have made it through quarantine.
Probably not. I mean, they didn't even make it in this way where they were probably mingling a lot because they are part of Hollywood. So yeah, I'm sure they got around. But I think that was one of the challenges. There was this lack of connection in a lot of places. And yes, Marilyn Monroe was very self-conscious and she did seem to have been looking for someone to complete her, and that would have happened through bridging either her gate 22 with gate 12, her gate 36 with gate 35, and then she needs additional gates, gate 23 with 43, and gate 62 with a gate 17. So if we're looking at James Doughty again for a second, we can see that this is actually happening. He's bridging her split. So she would have felt more complete with him. She also apparently was sending him letters every day at the beginning. So while it was more or less an arranged marriage, there still seems to have been love in this marriage, at least within a human design perspective, a feeling of connectedness. That didn't happen with Joe DiMaggio. Neither of them were bridging each other's splits. They're still feeling very unbridged, I would say. So the next one we're going to be taking a look at is John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
JFK for you Americans out there. JFK.
JFK.
I was so surprised when I saw this chart. So for those of you who are just watching, he is a 3-5 emotional projector with a lot of no definition or undefinedness and openness in his chart. So open head, open spleen, undefined throat, G-center, sacral, root, and the only, I love a one and only, I can so relate, a one and only channel kind of person. But the 3740, undefined, connecting his ego center and his emotional center. So I just thought that this was very interesting. One, him being a president and being so undefined and having to deal with such major things happening in the world and having to process all of that, feel all of that, and still have intuition for others, right? With the very undefined spleen, very open head. Just from knowing this human, like American history wise, I think it's very interesting to see his chart and now see it in this space. But also together with Marilyn's chart, I wonder if she felt the energy from the 3740 and was like connected to it. You know what I mean? I wonder if she like really, I mean, for her to have 3 dudes with the same channel, I think she must have felt very connected to that energy. Yeah, let's take a look at their charts together. So together they are 9 and 0, nowhere to go. they have together 5 electromagnetic channels. So again, that initial spark was definitely there. Only one compromised channel with Marilyn over JFK, and 2 dominance channels. They have one each. So Marilyn dominating one over JFK and then vice versa. Truthfully, with 9-0 nowhere to go, it definitely makes sense that this did not last long either. I think it may have lasted like a year, which is longer than Joe, but it's very interesting. They both bring each other voices in different ways. So JFK brings the 35 to Marilyn's 36 and gives her a voice for her emotions, and Marilyn allows JFK through the head and the ajna to then vocalize his thoughts and his thought processes. So I wonder how much of this connection played into their alleged pillow talk that he overshared about political things, and just although they don't have the 1333 together, so I don't know how much like secret divulsion was happening, but I think, at least from what I'm seeing, I feel like a lot of vocal channels were opened, and I wonder if that led to more being shared than it should have been. You know what I'm saying? Allegedly.
Yep, that's a very good point. So yeah, true. They provided each other with a voice, and so you can also again see that he is bridging her splits. Let me just take. Yeah, he didn't, because he only has one channel, so he has no split to bridge. So he's bridging her split. So again, she felt more complete with him. However, they together still are a split definition. So the partner that she felt most complete with up to now is James Doughty. We didn't cover quite a few of the other lovers, and even also Arthur Miller, for example. We are not going to be covering him. So we don't know his chart because we didn't want to extend this episode into infinity, which seems like it would have with all the rumors floating around. Who was the one that said this quote of, if she was really sleeping with all the people that she was rumored to be sleeping with, there wouldn't be any time for movies? Anyways, I thought that was a funny quote. I don't know what is true, what is not. We only know a few of her lovers and partners as fact, I would say. So I think that's also part of her allure, this secret side of Marilyn. But the other part that they're giving to one another is a sense of direction, which I think is very important for a president, but also was very important for Marilyn, that she finally felt like she had a sense of direction, which came from the 214 channel, which is all about the drive to go into a direction, the sacral energy. And yeah, the interesting part is that they're really defining a lot of channels for one another, a lot of centers for one another, not channels, but they're creating channels with one another to form these center energies. So it must have been a very interesting dynamic as well. I find it fascinating that most Kennedys were unfaithful. I don't really know who was faithful. There must have been a few, I don't know. But apparently most of them were unfaithful. And the wives still stood by them. I don't know if this was a past generation thing, but they really, if you know of Jackie Kennedy, you know how graceful she's portrayed and how beautiful she's being made out to be. Graceful. So
Jackie
he
was a
provided
boss.
that. Yeah. And even the next one that we're going to be looking into, Bobby Kennedy or Robert Kennedy, his wife was also standing by his side, supporting him, and he seems to have been even more Casanova-ish than John F. Kennedy, apparently. I don't know. We don't know the truth. This is just the rumor mill going here, especially from two people that have no idea of those things. But we try our best when we research. Okay. With Robert Kennedy, you can see that his chart is very defined by itself. He's a split definition in himself, within himself. He still also has the ego defined. However, he only has part of the 4037 channel. Still, an energy that is attracting her. I think it's also due to the fact that this is a channel that has this contract where it's about, I provide the food for you, the money for you to get the groceries, or I provide you with the necessary things, whichever we agreed upon contractually. This is either a written contract or a verbal contract, but it's really about making contracts of what I bring to the table and then what the other person makes out of whatever I brought to the table. So it's very important for her. It's for them, for the ones that have this channel. And it's also very important for them to have this tribal bond. It's a very tribal energy. It's really about honing in on the family, close friends, and supporting one another. So I think this is the energy that she was seeking, and especially considering that she was an orphan, or not, she wasn't really an orphan, but she liked to portray herself in that way. And she also did go through a lot of heartache with her mom and her father. So maybe the feeling of being an orphan was really there with her, because she didn't really have two parents that were looking out for her the way that a child deserves to have parents looking out for them. So I think this ego/heart energy definitely is something that very much attracts her. Apart from that, he has the emotional solar plexus, the root, the spleen, the sacral, the G center, and the throat defined. So the only things that he has not defined is the head. It's completely open, and the ajna, it's undefined. Together, they create a 9 and 0, nowhere to go. We should have taken John and Bobby's chart together, because I'm pretty sure that this is going to be similar, and they were super tight with one another. Okay, they have the undefined head, or completely open head, and undefined ajna. Bobby and John F. Kennedy. I just wanted to look at that real quick, because they are also very, very, very tight, and they are a single definition. I know it has nothing to do with Marilyn Monroe's lovers, but for both of them, the brother was super important, and I think that's also how it could have even worked with Marilyn being in the mix of it, because their relationship was so tight that another woman wouldn't necessarily have broken it. And apparently once JFK died, once JFK died and Marilyn Monroe passed, Bobby Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy, they became very tight, which bothered the wife of Robert Kennedy a lot. There's a rumor that they were together. It's also, again, not clear if it's the truth or not, but because he lost his brother and he was feeling really low about it, and she was the only one, so Jackie was the only one that really truly understood his loss. That's why they started to bond and support one another. So for him, his brother was his one and only and everything, as far as I've understood.
Can we have a quick moment for Bobby Kennedy's wife? She literally passed away just 15 days ago. Ethel Kennedy.
Wow.
Yeah. She was 96, 94,
wow.
96.
One
Rip
of the
Ethel.
only ones.
Boo-boo. Yeah.
Because all the other ones, or many of the other ones, lost their lives so early due to plane crashes, assassinations, suicide.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was Bobby Kennedy's wife, who just passed away 15 days ago.
Crazy.
Wow. Also, yeah. I didn't realize that Bobby was married and cheating on his wife with her. Ah.
Yeah.
She's got passed around the Kennedy clan. Jesus.
Yeah. Allegedly.
Allegedly. You right.
So together, let's take a look at Marilyn Monroe and Bobby Kennedy again. Together, they are still a split definition. There is a lot of dominance going on, particularly from Robert Kennedy. Marilyn is only dominating him in one aspect, the 49-19. And this channel probably also caused a lot of havoc in her relationships. Not necessarily in this one, because there is no compromise in that one. But when we're looking at the John F. Kennedy and also at Joe DiMaggio, there's compromise in both of those. And this channel is about being able to voice what it is you need in a relationship and having specific values and kind of, how you want a relationship to be, what it is that you want your relationship values to be like. And she had both of these sides, whereas Joe DiMaggio only had this, I would like my needs to be met, but he didn't have the other side to complete him in that aspect. And he was apparently a very jealous individual with Marilyn Monroe. And that could have caused this because he felt like his needs weren't met and he wasn't taken care of properly. So he may have been quite jealous towards the other individuals and men in her life. And especially as well, on top of that, she has the Hanging Gate 30. And the 41, this full channel 4130, is again a channel that is a lot about these fantasies and desires and fantasizing about other individuals. And when we're looking at the connection with Bobby Kennedy, this channel is in compromise. So in this case, what could have happened is that because he has the full energy of having fantasies and being able to express them and potentially even wanting to live it out, because he has the 36 as well defined as well as her. So if this would be completely closed with the 35 as well, it could actually lead to manifestation. Currently, this is more about fantasies without this full connection, because the throat is about really manifesting things. So in their case, what could have happened is that he was fantasizing a lot about other individuals in his life, which is one of the reasons why he may have had all these extramarital affairs, because he didn't just fantasize about it, but he had this pressure from the root all the way up to gate 36, which wanted to get manifested through the throat and lived out.
Just did a quick Google. He had 11 kids with his wife, Ethel, in their 18-year marriage. So, yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably looking for a bit of an escape, you know?
Yes. I'm sure. So with this gate of fantasies and adventure, I can imagine that the married life isn't necessarily his thing. But then again, I mean, his brother's thing was the married life more than him. But I think it was just, there was just a lot of bad role modeling happening in the Kennedy family. So they grew up to also just follow into the footsteps. I have no idea who their father is. I don't know. I know that they're a very, very wealthy family, but I don't know how they made their wealth. But there must have been quite some conditioning happening. So the only other one that we kind of slightly looked into was Natasha Lytess. And as I said, this is very unreliable. So it's unclear which year she was born, if it's 1911, 1913, 1915, if it's June or if it's May or whichever. So we have no idea, but I chose to stick with the projector one for obvious reasons.
Is it because you're a projector and she may or may not have the same channel as you?
Well, maybe. No, but the actual reason for me choosing this chart is because Marilyn is a projector. And I think the relationship between those two was probably pretty interesting. So it's rumored that they had a romantic relationship, that they were together, but it's not set in stone, so it's not sure. However, Natasha Lytess kept or claimed that Marilyn never really liked sex with especially men. She was only very comfortable with women. This is something that you hear from several different sources. I don't know if it's true or not, but I can imagine that this was a relationship of 11 years overall, whether they were together throughout all this time or not. Projector with projector is said to be a healthy relationship because there's no sacral energy pressure. However, when two people come together and they create the sacral, there would still be the sacral energy produced. In this case, it doesn't. So the sacral is still undefined. So also the sexual energy wasn't necessarily very strong with them unless there was a planet that came through or people coming through. But yeah, Natasha Lytess also claimed that Marilyn was walking around naked all day long. So she seems to have been a very free-spirited person, Marilyn Monroe, if it's true. In general, you can see that. But that was pretty much the only reason why I chose the projector chart. However, it's really, really unclear, which is also why I don't really want to go into detail here. It was just one of the influences that Marilyn seems to have had in her life. Some say good, some say bad, but yeah, I thought it was interesting.
If this is the case, that's a triple split again. So I wonder how, for just looking at the chart, like let's say that this is real, right? If it was a triple split, that's got to be, again, a challenging relationship, which could be why there were maybe ups and downs in it. I don't know. It sounds like Natasha had some strong impressions of that time with her, right? So maybe they both felt things differently, but obviously didn't have that sacral pressure. So it probably hit different than it did with Joe. But yeah, I wonder, I wish we could be the flies on the wall for their relationship and just gain a better understanding of like the nature of it as well.
Apparently, she was also very jealous, like Joe.
Interesting.
So she seems to have been, at least this is, I mean, yeah, all the sources, I got it from YouTube, okay, so I don't know how reliable it is, but she seems to have had a lot of jealousy towards the men that Marilyn Monroe was hanging out with, and Joe also seems to have had an issue with it, so yeah.
Interesting. I'm going to stick up for her, though, because she's a 5'2" ego projector, so us ego peeps got to stick together, so let go. If this is accurate, though, how accurate was her birthday? Because they both had the same birthday, even if it wasn't the same birth year.
No, sometimes it said something with May, and sometimes it said June. So it was
could
all
be
over
very,
the place.
very different.
Her death day was very accurate. It was consistent all over.
Well, if only that did anything for us, you know?
So yeah.
Damn. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed our tour of Marilyn's love life. It was kind of like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but also very different from that book.
Yeah. I have never read it, but I trust your judgment.
Fantastic. Would highly recommend. Cool. Was there anything that stuck out to you the most out of all of these relationships that we identified?
Ego.
Yeah, I agree.
HeartCore.
What a fantastic way to end that. I wasn't even planned, guys. Was not even planned. But you're right, because you said the ego is only what percentage of people? Like 10?
30.
30. Okay, it was a little bit higher than I thought it was. But still, for it to be 30% of people, that knocks out 70% of the population, and she chose everyone with a defined ego. Girl, we're just out there looking for some heart, you know? I get it.
Aww. Yeah. Also, perfect way to end it. Let's end it.
All right,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone, for listening.
Until next week.
Bye.
Ciao.